I listened to Jack talk about climate change as a security issue. It is one of the top national security issues that there is. And we all know that it's very, very hard to convey to people the full measure of the degree to which this affects people's lives. In a minute, you know, we've been doing some good work. The Yale School of Forestry has done some terrific work on the language of climate change and how we can reach people more effectively and talk to them. But you're a group that doesn't need to be cajoled about this. We need to remind ourselves that this is a life and death issue. And the ocean's connection to climate change is a life and death issue. First of all, 51% of all the oxygen we breathe comes out of the ocean. And the entire chemistry of the ocean is being changed by greenhouse gas that falls in the ocean and raises the acidity, the pH level. And we've seen studies that show that where you have the higher pH level, you have smaller clams, for instance. You have a challenge to all crustacean, with the possibility that ultimately you may wind up with changes in lobsters and migration, massive migration because of the search for cold water and the ability to find cleaner water and survive. We have 500 dead zones as a result of land use policies in various parts of the world. 500 of them around the world. And there are three great challenges to the oceans today. One is the levels of pollution. There will be more plastic in the ocean in 20 or 30 years than there will be fish. And we have too much money chasing too few fish. So 7 or 8 of the top fisheries of the world are already overfished. And the rest are just about ad extremis and reaching it fast. I was in South Africa not so long ago and saw this fleet of Japanese shipping, of fishing boats, all out of the water, being overhauled and worked on, and Cape Town yards. They never go home, they just go out in the ocean. And I hate to say it, but there are a number of countries which are completely disregarding the drift net ban that Ted Stevens and I got at the United Nations a number of years ago. In the 1990s, we took that to the UN, and they violated it. So you have strip mining of the ocean, literally. And 50% or more of the catch is thrown overboard. You have a whole bunch of 747s lined up to pack in with blue tuna that get shipped to Japan for the next meal of sushi. And now you have 400 million people in China who have come out of poverty, which is great. They're in the middle class, but they've discovered sushi. And you can imagine what the demand curve is going to be. People say, oh, well, we'll fill in some of the gaps with agriculture, but agriculture, people are learning, is carrying all kinds of problems with it if it isn't managed correctly in terms of the excrement, the food stock necessary to do it, and so forth. All of these things are connected. Why? Because it's an ecosystem. Because it's alive today. All you have to do is go back to Rachel Carson in 1962 when she wrote Silent Spring. And she warned us. She said, you know, it's not that the oceans may die. The oceans will be there. It's that life will die. Within it and outside of it. And we are seeing, I mean, you know, I've been at this since we went, Al Gore, myself, Frank Lautenberg, John Chafee. A bunch of us went down to Rio in 1992 for the first Earth Summit, when we had a voluntary plan to try to deal with climate change. Scientists understood then what this was all about. And they understood then there are no such thing as alternative facts. Science tells us what's happening to the oceans and climate, and we have to respond accordingly. It's very simple. But, you know, when you look at what is happening today, this threat is rising, I'm seeing in some ways. But I'm pleased to tell you this, and it's encouraging. I'm an optimist. I really am an optimist, notwithstanding the level of the challenge. And I'm an optimist for a couple of reasons. But first, and I'll share those with you quickly, and then we'll sit down and have a conversation. But first of all, what we did in Paris, by the way, what we did in Paris, I think, only did happen because we went to China come to China 6 weeks in as secretary, having been in Copenhagen, and witnessed the failure of Copenhagen. I said, we've got to change this dynamic with China. This is not rocket science, common sense. China was leading the G77 to oppose what we needed to do. So Copenhagen failed. So I went to China and I sat with the Chinese, and I already knew from being chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee that there was an evolution in the thinking of China, because they have a huge air quality problem, but they also have a rising awareness among their population that this is a problem. They want clean water, they want clean air. And we were posting at our American embassy in Beijing, we posted every day the air quality in Beijing. And people in China were tuning in to the Beijing American Embassy air quality postings. And you know, there was an accountability that was beginning to build. So the party in China, the greatest goal of the party is survival, began to realize that there's agitation in the population. Second thing was, we knew that the Chinese wanted to try to play a different role. And so we thought being inclusive, trying to bring them to the table rather than sowing seeds of confrontation, was the way to approach it. And I went there within 6 weeks, sat with the top leadership, including President Xi, and we persuaded them to join us in a working group for 1 year to see if we were able to work out a way by which we could jointly announce our reductions for the national intended emissions reductions, and it worked. 1 year later, Barack Obama and President Xi stood up in Beijing and said, this is what we're committed to doing. And the rest of the world took note of that and said, wow, for the first time, there's a cooperative initiative between the G77 and the United States. And we went to Paris, and there were still hurdles to get over, but we had a sense of the possibility of getting there. Now, what did we do in Paris? I know Todd Stern was here earlier, and he talked to you a little about the next COP and some of the stuff coming up. Well, let me just say, in my comments at the very end, when they gavelled it to a close and the cheering had died down, I said, look, folks, we got to remember, we are not leaving Paris having guaranteed the world that we will keep the Earth's temperature to 2 degrees centigrade. Far from it. What we have done is brought 196 countries to the table, and we're going to guarantee that those 196 countries are sending a signal to the marketplace that they're all moving in the same direction. And that, we believed, was going to change corporate behavior, change the allocation of capital and investment behavior, so that we began to see the private sector take hold, take this bit in its mouth. And that is exactly what has happened. Last year, for the first time in recorded history since we watched this stuff, more money was invested in sustainable alternative renewable energy than in fossil fuel. $358 billion. And that is what has helped bring the price of solar and the price of wind down, so it's now competitive with coal, more than competitive. And by the way, you ought to be demanding from the corporate world, and I've been trying to market this everywhere I go lately. We don't do honest accounting. We don't do honest a lot of things in terms of what's happening in our politics right now. But we don't do honest accounting with respect to the cost of coal. And when people compare coal to coal and to these other technologies, they don't take into account coal sludge. They don't take into account blank lung. They don't take into account the largest cause of children being hospitalized in summer in the United States of America, which costs us $55 billion a year, which is environmentally induced asthma. They don't take into account the runoff. They don't count the rise of the pH. They don't count the bleaching of the coral, the loss of the spawning grounds. You add it all up, it's not even close what the cost is today of clean energy of wind and solar versus coal. So, and by the way, there may be 15,000 coal miners in America. Our current president spends a lot of time focused on them. But there are more than 100,000 people who've come into the marketplace in the last 3 years, 10,000 right here in Rhode Island, working in the clean energy sector. And that's the future. Believe me, that's the future. Now, Scott Pruitt, obviously, and the EPA are moving backwards in the wrong direction. And I'm sure Todd talked to you, or others have talked to you today, about the ways in which the Climate Action Plan derogation is going to hurt. I can't pretend it doesn't hurt. But what it hurts in doing is really stripping away some of the momentum. What gives me confidence is that I've been in touch with governors around the country and mayors around the country before the Paris decision was announced by the president, and you've seen them stand up. We have 38 states in the United States of America that are committed by law, 28 of them, by voluntary law compliance, 8 of them. So 39, you have about 38 states total, representing 80% of the population of the United States of America that are all within a renewable portfolio standard law. And as a result, folks, I'm confident of this. We are going to continue to do what we're doing. We have 90 mayors in America, mayor of every major city in the United States. We have governors in all of these states, including your own, governor right here, are committed to moving forward with respect to Paris. And the result is, Donald Trump may have pulled out of Paris, but the American people are staying in Paris. We're going to meet the standard, and I believe we're going to exceed it. So, we're already halfway there, folks. We're already halfway, more than halfway there. So let me just close by trying to give you a sense of why we have to we got to go at this harder. In my judgment, it's not a question of whether we're going to get there. We're going to ultimately have a real transformation in this energy revolution. But there is a question about whether we're going to get there fast enough. That's really the challenge. And I just want to underscore to all of you, we are way behind right now. Last year I went up to the Arctic, and I went to Svalbard as secretary, and then I went to Greenland. In Greenland, I saw the Königsberg Fjord, where every day 86 million metric tons of ice is breaking off, calving, and flowing out into the fjord and out to sea. It's a stupefying sight when you see it. 86 million metric tons, to put it into perspective, every day is the equivalent of the entire water needs of greater New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, the greater New York area, for an entire year, every day. You go up on the ice sheet, which I did, and you look down into it, there's a huge hole. You can see it in various places where they drilled and so forth. You can see this torrential river running underneath it. And scientists worried that the river will act as a sort of slippage sheet for the ice, and you'll have large portions break off. And all of the ice on Greenland is ice that increases displacement of the ocean faster because it's on rock. It's not like the Arctic, which is floating in the sea and already displaces. Then you have two scientists. They all said to me, Secretary, it's great to come up here, and we really want to show you things, but you've got to go down to the Antarctic if you really want to see what's happening and what the threat is. So I took them up on it. And on election day of last year, I was flying from New Zealand to the Antarctic. I voted by absentee ballot and thought very hard about staying down there for a while. But decided that we're going to come back here for the fight. And what I saw down there, every scientist down there said, Secretary, this is the canary in the coal mine. And there's 3 miles deep of ice in that West Antarctic ice sheet. And I walked out on the Ross Sea, saw the the changes that are taking place are apparent to the naked eye, that they went through them in terms of just the science. And we had the Larsen ice sheet already break off once. That was the size of your state that broke off and floated out to sea. They now have a new fissure, which was predicted when I was there. It's now evident, which threatens an even much larger break-off of ice. But what's really disturbing is the weight of the ice pushes the continent down, the ocean comes in underneath the ice sheet, and that destabilizes the ice. And the levels of instability are showing up in any number of different ways, and they really fear major meltdown possibilities. Now, it's not going to happen in this century that you see the total meltdown, but over 2 centuries you could have a total meltdown. That's 180 feet of climate change, of sea level rise. Rhode Island has the greatest single threat of any state in the country in terms of your historic structures. You have about 50% of them, ironically, here in Rhode Island. And I went to the naval school up there, the OCS here, in the 1930s. That's not when I went. But in the 1930s, since then, it's gone up a foot, normal sea level rise, and it's now melting faster and rising faster. And in Miami, the mayor of Miami is raising roads to pump out water on sunny day high tides. In Boston, our seawall, we have sunny day high tide overflow over the seawall. So this is happening. Irma, first hurricane in history to have over 185 mile an hour winds for 24 hours sustained. Harvey, strongest rainfall in the history of any hurricane recorded. Everybody knows that the warmer water is adding more moisture, which adds more to the rain. Nobody's claiming that each hurricane was caused by climate change, but the intensity of these hurricanes is affected by climate change. So here's the 2 things we got to do. Number 1, we got to remember that there's a rightness to legislation, and there's a process. My friend and colleague Teddy Kennedy, your friend too, for years used to keep putting health care in, and everybody said, "You're crazy, it's not going to go forward." But he would put it in because he understood that there's a current timetable to the Senate and to the process. And he wanted to keep on pushing and be ready and have it there, and he did. This guy does the same thing with climate. 200 times he's gone to the floor of the Senate and he's laid out his time warning, and he is the principal single senator who is the most consistent leader today in the United States Senate on the subject of climate and oceans. And you ought to be really proud of that. Here's the real thing that makes the difference. And I know it makes a difference, because when I came back from Vietnam, the first thing I did was not go out and protest the war. First thing I did was sign up to help with Earth Day, 1970, the first Earth Day. Some of you here, I know, were part of that. We went out, and what did we do? We brought 20 million Americans out of their homes to say, we don't want to live next to the Woburn waste site. We don't want to see the Cuyahoga River light on fire. We don't want to drink water that gives us cancer. We don't want to breathe air. We can't even see the city of Los Angeles and other cities in America. That's what we said. But we didn't stop with 20 million people just coming out of their home, folks. We translated it into making the environment a voting issue. And we targeted the 12 worst votes in the United States House of Representatives. We labeled them the dirty dozen. We went after them in the 1973 race. And guess what happened? 7 of the 12 lost their seats. And Sheldon will affirm with me, there is nothing like a bunch of losing congressional friends to stiffen the spines of the remainers. Believe me. And that's what we have to do. What happened after that? That's when we passed the Clean Air Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, Marine Mammal Protection, Coastal Zone Management, the EPA was created. We didn't even have an EPA in the United States of America. And we got that raging environmentalist Richard Nixon to actually sign it. He signed it into law. Why? Because it was a voting issue and they had to do it. So I'm telling you folks, when only 57% of the people in this country come out and vote for President of the United States against the incumbent, we got a problem in making our own democracy work. Yeah, we got Citizen United, and yes, we've got the problem of a gerrymandered Congress where we don't even have a legitimate opportunity to have a democratic election in our general election. But notwithstanding that, we can change things if we are willing. You know, Rhode Island doesn't have the problem here. You've got Jim, Langman in Congress. You've got these two guys. But you all have cars. You get on there, but you can go eat some peanut butter jelly sandwiches for a few weeks in various parts of the country and make a difference. And that's how we are going to win back our future on this issue. I'm convinced. We can't just come to the Rhode Island Convention Center. We can't come to wherever it is, Paris, whatever, if we don't do the practical, hard work of making democracy work. I had a professor at college, John Morton Blum, who won elections in which I was awake fully, took notes properly, and I've never forgotten the sentence. He said, all politics is a reaction to felt needs. And I didn't know exactly what it meant when he said it, but then as I digested it as a senator and as an advocate and so forth, it now has total meaning. It means that the people who elect people have to not be satisfied until they're fully satisfied with the things that they want. Their demand has to be satisfied, and it means that the people in office have to understand they're not going to be happy or doing their job until they have met the full measure of what folks who elected them want. It's that balance between the aspiration and the reality of where you are. And that's where we have to get back to, I am convinced, with respect to climate and how can we have the United States Senate come to the floor in the middle of winter and hold up a snowball on the floor of the Senate and say, gee, there's snow, so there can't be climate change. Well, we do. Happens to be chairman of the Environment Committee.
Oh.
So, don't you think that that state ought to have an election that's worthy of America? So, folks, I mean, Winston Churchill came to America after the war to receive an award for temperance, believe it or not. And some of you know your history, you know. And the MC